Jesus waited 3 days to come back to life. It was perfect. If he had only waited 1 day, a lot of people wouldn't have even heard he died. They'd be all, "Hey Jesus, what up?" And Jesus would probably be like, "What up? I died yesterday." And they'd be all, "You look pretty alive to me, dude." And then Jesus would have to explain how he was resurrected and how it was a miracle. And the dude would be like, okay, whatever you say, bro." And he's not going to come back on a Saturday. Everybody's busy, doing chores, working the loom, trimming the beard. No. He waited the perfect number of days, 3. Plus, it's Sunday, so everyone's in church already. And they're all in there like, "Oh no, Jesus is dead." And then bam! He burst in the back door, running up the aisle. Everyone's totally psyched. And FYI, that's when he invented the high five. That's why we wait 3 days to call a woman, because that's how long Jesus wants us to wait. True story.
The visitor from outer space made a serious study of Christianity to learn, if he could, why Christians found it so easy to be cruel. He concluded that at least part of the trouble was slipshod storytelling in the New Testament. He supposed that the intent of the Gospels was to teach people, among other things, to be merciful, even to the lowest of the low. But the Gospels actually taught this: before you kill somebody, make absolutely sure he isn't well connected. So it goes. The flaw in the Christ stories, said the visitor from outer space, was that Christ, who didn't look like much, was actually the son of the most powerful being in the universe. Readers understood that, so when they came to the crucifixion, they naturally thought, and Rosewater read out loud again, "Oh boy, they sure picked the wrong guy to lynch _ time, and that thought had a brother. There are right people to lynch." Who? People not well connected. So it goes. The visitor from outer space made a gift to the earth of a new gospel. In it, Jesus really was a nobody, and a pain in the neck to a lot of people with better connections than he had. He still got to say all the lovely and puzzling things he said in the other gospels. So the people amused themselves one day by nailing him to a cross and planting the cross in the ground. There couldn't possibly be any repercussions, the lynchers thought. The reader would have to think that too, since the new gospel hammered home again and again what a nobody Jesus was. And then, just before the nobody died, the heavens opened up, and there was thunder and lightning. The voice of God came crashing down. He told the people that he was adopting the bum as his son, giving him the full powers and privileges of the son of the creator of the universe throughout all eternity. God said this: "From this moment on, he will punish horribly anybody who torments a bum who has no connections. It is the fate of great achievements, born from a way of life that sets truth before security, to be gobbled up by you and excreted in the form of shit. For centuries, great, brave, lonely men have been telling you what to do. Time and again you have corrupted, diminished, and demolished their teachings. Time and again you have been captivated by their weakest points, taken not the great truth, but some trifling error as your guiding principle. This, little man, is what you have done with Christianity, with the doctrine of sovereign people, with socialism, with everything you touch. Why, you ask, do you do this? I don't believe you really want an answer. When you hear the truth, you'll cry bloody murder or commit it. You had your choice between soaring to superhuman heights with Nietzsche and sinking into subhuman depths with Hitler. You shouted Heil, Heil, and chose the subhuman. You had the choice between Lenin's truly democratic constitution and Stalin's dictatorship. You chose Stalin's dictatorship. You had your choice between Freud's elucidation of the sexual core of your psychic disorders and his theory of cultural adaptation. You dropped the theory of sexuality and chose his theory of cultural adaptation, which left you hanging in midair. You had your choice between Jesus and his majestic simplicity, and Paul with his celibacy for priests and lifelong compulsory marriage for yourself. You chose the celibacy and compulsory marriage and forgot the simplicity of Jesus' mother, who bore her child for love and love alone. You had your choice between Marx's insight into the productivity of your living labor power, which alone creates the value of commodities, and the idea of the state. You forgot the living energy of your labor and chose the idea of the state. In the French Revolution, you had your choice between the cruel Robespierre and the great Danton. You chose cruelty and sent greatness and goodness to the guillotine. In Germany, you had your choice between Goering and Himmler on the one hand, and Liebknecht, Landau, and Mussam on the other. You made Himmler your police chief and murdered your great friends. You had your choice between Julius Streicher and Walter Rathenau. You murdered Rathenau. You had your choice between Lodge and Wilson. you murdered Wilson. You had your choice between the cruel Inquisition and Galileo's truth. You tortured and humiliated the great Galileo, from whose inventions you are still benefiting. And now, in the 20th century, you have brought the methods of the Inquisition to a new flowering. Every one of your acts of smallness and meanness throws light on the boundless wretchedness of the human animal. Why so tragic, you ask? Do you feel responsible for all evil? With remarks like that, you condemn yourself. If, little man among millions, you were to shoulder the barest fraction of your responsibility, the world would be a very different place. Your great friends wouldn't perish, struck down by your smallness. There was just such a man when I was young. An Austrian who invented a new way of life and convinced himself that he was the chap to make it work. He tried to impose his reformation by the sword and plunged the civilized world into misery and chaos. But the thing which this fellow had overlooked, my friend, was that he had a predecessor in the Reformation business, called Jesus Christ. Perhaps we may assume that Jesus knew as much as the Austrian did about saving people. But the odd thing is that Jesus did not turn the disciples into stormtroopers, burn down the temple at Jerusalem, and fix the blame on Pontius Pilate. On the contrary, he made it clear that the business of the philosopher was to make ideas available and not to impose them on people. The gifts of the Master are these: freedom, life, hope, new direction, transformation, and intimacy with God. If the cross was the end of the story, we would have no hope. But the cross isn't the end. Jesus didn't escape from death. He conquered it and opened the way to heaven for all who will dare to believe. The truth of this moment, if we let it sweep over us, is stunning. It means Jesus really is who he claimed to be. We are really as lost as he said we are, and he really is the only way for us to intimately and spiritually connect with God again. And then I stand in front of God's throne, squinting up at his blazing glory, and he says, "You had your opportunities, boy, but did you listen? No. You went on heedlessly reading that garbagey magazine with pictures of naked girls in it. How juvenile. I gave geese more sense than that. Please God, I'm only 14 years old, a teenager, have mercy. Be loving, I was," says God, "for eons. And look at what it got me. You, God, turns in disgust, just the way Daddy does. Sorry, but I'm the creator. I take it personally. There are slugs and bugs and night crawlers I feel better about having created. I mean, there are sparrows. I've got my eye on one right now. Is that sparrow consumed with lust? No. He mates in the spring and that's the end of it. Consider the lilies. Do they think about lily tits all the time? No. They look not and they lust not. And yet I say unto you that you will never be half as attractive as they. Therefore I say unto you, think not about peckers and boobs and all that nonsense. And your heavenly Father will see that you meet a good woman and marry her, just as I do for the sparrow and walleye. Yea, verily, even the night crawler and the eel pout. But I've told you this over and over for 19 centuries. And now, verily, it's too late. Time's up, Buster. Lights out. Game's over. There is a kind of listening with half an ear that presumes already to know what the other person has to say. It is an impatient, inattentive listening that despises the brother and is only waiting for a chance to speak and thus get rid of the other person. This is no fulfillment of our obligation, and it is certain that here too our attitude toward our brother only reflects our relationship to God. It is little wonder that we are no longer capable of the greatest service of listening that God has committed to us, that of hearing our brother's confession, if we refuse to give ear to our brother on lesser subjects. Secular education today is aware that often a person can be helped merely by having someone who will listen to him seriously, and upon this insight it has constructed its own soul therapy, which has attracted great numbers of people, including Christians. But Christians have forgotten that the ministry of listening has been committed to them by Him who is Himself the great listener and whose work they should share. We should listen with the ears of God that we may speak the word of God.
Can you see that bright star one of these men is pointing to? When they left Jerusalem, the star appeared. These men are from the east, and they study the stars. They believe that this new star is leading them to someone important. The bright star in the sky above Bethlehem. When the men got to Jerusalem, they asked, "Where is the child who is to be king of the Jews?" Jews is another name for Israelites. "We first saw the child's star when we were in the east," the men said, "and we have come to worship him." When Herod, who is king at Jerusalem, heard about this, he got upset. He did not want another king to take his place. So Herod called the chief priests and asked, "Where will the promised king be born?" They answered, "The Bible says in Bethlehem." So Herod called the men from the east and said, "Go make a search for the young child. When you find him, let me know. I want to go and worship him too." But really, Herod wanted to find the child to kill him. Then the star moves ahead of the men to Bethlehem, and it stops over the place where the child is. When the men go into the house, they find Mary and little Jesus. They bring out gifts and give them to Jesus. But later, Jehovah warns the men in a dream not to go back to Herod. So they return to their own country by another road. When Herod learns that the men from the east have left for home, he gets very angry. So he gives the command for all the boys in Bethlehem 2 years of age and under to be killed. But Jehovah warns Joseph ahead of time in a dream, and Joseph leaves with his family for Egypt. Later, when Joseph learns that Herod has died, he takes Mary and Jesus back home to Nazareth. This is where Jesus grows up. Who do you think made that new star to shine? Remember, the men first went to Jerusalem after seeing the star. Satan, the devil, wanted to kill God's son, and he knew that King Herod of Jerusalem would try to kill him. So Satan is the one who must have made that star shine. As Jesus travels throughout the land, he heals the sick. The news of these miracles is told about in the villages and towns all around. So people bring to him those who are crippled and blind and deaf, and many others who are sick. And Jesus heals them all. Over 3 years have now passed since John baptized Jesus. And Jesus tells his apostles that soon he will go up to Jerusalem, where he will be killed, and then rise from the dead. In the meantime, Jesus keeps on healing the sick. One day Jesus is teaching on a Sabbath. The Sabbath is a day of rest for the Jews. The woman you see here has been very sick. For 18 years she was bent over and couldn't stand up straight. So Jesus puts his hands on her, and she begins to stand up. She is healed. This makes the religious leaders angry. There are 6 days in which we should work. One of them shouts to the crowd. Those are the days to come for healing, not on the Sabbath. But Jesus answers, "You bad men. Any one of you would untie your donkey and take it out for a drink on the Sabbath. So shouldn't this poor woman who has been sick for 18 years be healed on the Sabbath?" Jesus' answer makes these bad men ashamed. Later, Jesus and his apostles travel on toward Jerusalem. When they are just outside the town of Jericho, 2 blind beggars hear that Jesus is passing by. So they shout, "Jesus, help us." Jesus calls the blind men over and asks, "What do you want me to do for you?" They say, "Lord, let our eyes be opened." Jesus touches their eyes and right away they can see. Do you know why Jesus does all these wonderful miracles? Because he loves people and wants them to have faith in him. And so we can be sure that when he rules as king, nobody on earth will be sick again. A short time after healing the 2 blind beggars, Jesus comes to a small village near Jerusalem. He tells 2 of his disciples, "Go into the village and you will find a young donkey. Untie it and bring it to me." When the donkey is brought to him, Jesus sits on it. Then he rides to Jerusalem a short distance away. When he gets near the city, a large crowd of people comes out to meet him. Most of them take off their coats and put them on the road. Others cut off branches from palm trees. They put these on the road too, and they shout, "God bless the King who comes in Jehovah's name." Long ago in Israel, new kings would ride into Jerusalem on a young donkey to show themselves to the people. This is what Jesus is doing. And these people are showing that they want Jesus to be their king, but not all the people want him. We can see this by what happens when Jesus goes to the temple. At the temple, Jesus heals persons who are blind and crippled. When the young children see this, they shout praises to Jesus. But this makes the priests angry, and they tell Jesus, "Do you hear what the children are saying?" "Yes, I do," Jesus answers. "Did you never read in the Bible where it says, 'Out of the mouths of little children God will bring forth praise'?" So the children keep on praising God's King. We want to be like those children, don't we? Some people may try to stop us from talking about God's kingdom, but we will keep right on telling others about the wonderful things Jesus will do for people. It was not time for Jesus to begin ruling as king when he was on earth. When will this time come? Jesus' disciples want to know. We will read about this next. This is Jesus on the Mount of Olives. The 4 men with him are his apostles. They are the brothers Andrew and Peter, and also the brothers James and John. That is God's temple in Jerusalem you can see over there in the distance. The temple in Jerusalem. It has been 2 days since Jesus rode into Jerusalem on the young donkey. It is Tuesday. Earlier in the day, Jesus was at the temple. There the priests tried to grab Jesus to kill him, but they were afraid to do this because the people liked Jesus. "You snakes and sons of snakes," Jesus called those religious leaders. Then Jesus said that God would punish them because of all the bad things they had done. After that, Jesus came up to the Mount of Olives, and then these 4 apostles started asking him questions. Do you know what they are asking Jesus? The apostles are asking about things in the future. They know that Jesus will put an end to all badness on earth, but they want to know when this will happen. When will Jesus come again to rule as king? Jesus knows that his followers on earth will not be able to see him when he comes again. This is because he will be in heaven, and they will not be able to see him there. So Jesus tells his apostles some of the things that will be happening on earth when he is ruling as king in heaven. What are some of these things? Jesus says that there will be great wars, many people will be sick and hungry, crime will be very bad, and there will be big earthquakes. Jesus also says that the good news about God's kingdom will be preached everywhere in the earth. Have we seen these things happening in our time? Yes, and so we can be sure that Jesus is now ruling in heaven. Soon he will put an end to all badness on earth. It is Thursday night now, 2 days later. Jesus and his 12 apostles have come to this large upstairs room to eat the Passover meal. The man you see leaving is Judas Iscariot. He is going to tell the priests how they can get Jesus. Just the day before, Judas went to them and asked, "What will you give me if I help you catch Jesus?" They said, 30 silver coins. So Judas is now going to meet these men so that he can lead them to Jesus. Isn't that terrible? The Passover meal is finished. But Jesus now begins another special meal. He hands his apostles a loaf of bread and says, "Eat it, because this means my body, which is to be given for you." Then he hands them a glass of wine and says, "Drink it, because this means my blood, which is to be poured out for you." The Bible calls this the Lord's evening meal, or the Lord's Supper. The Israelites ate the Passover to remind them of when God's angel passed over their houses in Egypt, but killed the firstborn in the houses of the Egyptians. But now Jesus wants his followers to remember him and how he gave his life for them. And that is why he tells them to celebrate this special meal each year. After eating the Lord's evening meal, Jesus tells his apostles to be brave and strong in faith. Finally, they sing songs to God and then leave. It is very late now, probably past midnight. Let's see where they go.
All the good things we have come from God. He made the sun to give us light by day, and the moon and stars so we can have some light at night. And God made the earth for us to live on. But the sun, the moon, the stars, and the earth were not the first things God made. Do you know what was the first? God first made persons like himself. We can't see these persons just as we can't see God. In the Bible, these persons are called angels. God made the angels to live with himself in heaven. The first angel God made was very special. He was God's first son, and he worked with his Father. He helped God to make all other things. He helped God to make the sun, the moon, the stars, and also our earth. What was the earth like then? In the beginning, no one could live on earth. There was nothing but one big ocean of water all over the land. But God wanted people to live on earth, so he began to get things ready for us. What did he do? Well, first the earth needed light. So God made the light from the sun to shine on the earth. He made it so there could be both nighttime and daytime. Afterward, God caused land to come up above the water of the ocean. At first, there was nothing on the land. It looked like the picture you see here. There were no flowers or trees or animals. There were not even any fish in the oceans. God had a lot more work to do to make the earth really nice for animals and people to live on.